let's start off with PimEyes. Again, controversial tool by many folks, but it allows you to, for example, take a photo. I encourage, if you're doing this for a defensive aspect, I encourage you to use a photo that's already on the internet somewhere publicly, like if it's for your job or if it's on social media and you know it's been out there already. You can use a photo that's been already publicly out there. If you're using it from like an offensive technique, you can use raw images, images that you find in the wild. Here are some use cases of using things like PimEyes. It's really simple to use, really. You just upload a photo. I don't have one on here per se, but you upload a photo and it shows you other search results of images that appear across the internet. You can use the tool without an account. If you want to see where that image is actually hosted, that's where the paid feature is of PimEyes. Here's one example I've used in the past. There's this far-right actor in Russia. There's a global far-right movement called identitarianism, which is like using identity politics for like white identity politics. This guy, Ross Marsov, is a leader, or was a leader, of Generation Identity Russia, which was a group I was monitoring for a short period of time. And I was interested to see like I knew that his name was fake. It's like the most fake Russian name that you could think of. His handle is also like Nordic-ish. So it's kind of weird. I was like, who is this guy? So I used PimEyes to run an image search on this photo. I researched him a little bit and I found quite a few images of him across the internet, including this one, which was posted on like an authorship website about him posting like his right-wing Duginist views on the internet. I reverse image searched that image on Google Images, and I found his professional site, which links to his real name on his job website, basically. So from just from an image of him and his and from his pseudonym, I was able to link to his activity as an far right-wing author, but also his real name and identity. Other things that I've been able to glean about him is, if I open this image, I was able to identify that he did fight in Ukraine. And I was able to geolocate where this image in particular was taken. Considering that I knew that, he has like a Russia tag, it looks recent. I used something called Google Lens to I cropped the photo and used Google Lens. And it told me that this was likely in Azovstal, which is a region of Ukraine that was having, like, in the Donetsk region of Ukraine, that was having heavy artillery and fighting. And I was able to geolocate the actual factory that was being bombed at the particular time. I also corroborated that with things like social media, where he was posting on Telegram, where he was like, I got injured in Ukraine, and then left and is now living in Moscow or something like that. He's being a total loser. I was able to, corroborate, different sources of information. That's what open source intelligence allows you to do in these resources, is like glean information from seemingly meaningless breadcrumbs. I also kind of took note. I was recently in the Caucasus region, which is like Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, for a conference out there. And I noticed that while doing that conference, that he had changed his location to Armenia a couple months prior, because I hadn't followed him for like 6 months or something like that. And curious enough, these images that were taken of him were at like a Russian separatist movement in Armenia for like the Russian minority there to basically make their own state within Armenia. And then I was able to link that with like other images on his social media, including this one, which is like the Russian separatist guys, which, funny enough, this guy actually became a outspoken anti-Putin sort of guy more recently. So he's kind of changed his views. But nonetheless, I was able to kind of link his activities in that region as well. That is a little bit about Tim Eyes. I also used the other facial recognition tool, Search for Faces, because I knew he was on Brussels social media websites. That linked me to like 4 different VK profiles that he had with like various different fake names for doing like far right work and stuff like that. But yeah, that's one use case. Let's talk about DocumentCloud a little bit briefly. So this is DocumentCloud. It's a pretty useful resource. If I go into all documents, you'll be able to see, and you can view this portion without an account. I'm currently logged in, but you can view this without logging in, and you can see there's 5 million public documents, which comprise something like hundreds of millions of pages or whatever. And you can do advanced searches on here. You can do things like, I don't know, maybe there's something about the Canadian Navy. There's like a whole search query sort of language related to this that you can learn more about here. You can do things like Boolean, Royal Canadian Navy diversity training. Love it. Gotta love it. Prodigy contract. I have no idea what these things are, but you can do like advanced searches, and it pulls the text from within the PDFs. It's a pretty neat research tool. On top of DocumentCloud, you have things like things that are called add-ons, which is things that I'm currently working on that allow you to extend the baseline functionality of DocumentCloud. To cover really briefly the baseline functionality, DocumentCloud is used by journalists to embed documents in articles and stuff like that. So you can create custom embed links. That's like its biggest use case. But you can also do collaborative efforts like annotations. So like you can share annotations with other journalists or researchers or activists groups or archivists or librarians or educators are also using this platform. There's redaction tools, which allow you to redact personally identifying information, stuff like that. There's PDF modification tools. So you can like rearrange, rotate, delete, insert, split pages, do things like that. Something that I find really useful, but I think is underutilized, is the ability to use tags and data to categorize information. This is a pretty neat feature that allows you to kind of use like advanced database sort of metadata integrations to kind of organize projects. I'll give you a brief example. This one is January 6th Commission. So the January 6th Commission is a commission in the United States that was investigating the January 6th far right wing riots that occurred in the Capitol, and they posted all these public documents on the internet about their research and like all of the interviews that they did. But it wasn't really publicly accessible in the regard that like they just posted on the internet, but there was no way to actually search within the documents or do any kind of analysis like that. So what I did is like I scraped all the documents from the website and then uploaded it to DocumentCloud. And then I also categorized them. So you can do things like categorize it into projects. In this case, it's project January 6th Commission. You can also add a tag. Let's say I only want to see the things that are related to the supporting material, the video exhibits. What I also did is like they had videos and stuff like that, audio files that you couldn't, it's not a PDF document. You can't just upload it to DocumentCloud raw, but what you can do is you can use a DocumentCloud add-on. It's called Transcribe Audio. It uses OpenAI's Whisper library to transcribe audio for you. It works pretty well. It's like alternatives to like Otter. The only thing it doesn't do is like speaker recognition, so you can't determine like what piece of a timestamp who the speaker was, but it at least allows you to kind of like index and search through the text and figure out at what time somebody was talking about a particular subject. Pretty useful if you're doing like interviews or something like that. And of course, you could drop a link to Google Drive, Mediafire, YouTube, whatever search platform or whatever. Metadata can also be useful to categorize. Let's see if I can do some digging here. I also was able to make these documents censorship resistant. So what that allows you, what that means is on top of uploading them to DocumentCloud, which is one platform, I also was able to use another add-on called, where is it? There's so many here. Push to IPFS. For those that are not aware, IPFS is the Interplanetary File System. It's kind of, think of it as like a distributed file storage system. Not one, server or entity holds the authority or holds a particular file. It can be, stored across different computers and different resources at different times. It also makes it so that it's incredibly hard to censor particular documents and delete documents. So if you're interested in like archival sort of stuff and you're trying to store it long term, you can do things like push all your documents to IPFS, and that creates more metadata for the document. Let's say you want to be able to prove that a document is legitimate, and you were actually that you actually retrieved that document from where you said it was retrieved from. You can pull the hash value. What a hash value is it runs a document through an algorithm, and it gives you a unique identifier for that particular document. If that document were to change at all, the hash value changes drastically. And so within DocumentCloud, all those features are kind of built in. So let's say I have a document and I want to be able to prove that that hash value hasn't changed. I can use something like the document hasher add-on. There's other tools. I mentioned Klaxon earlier, which is like a web monitoring tool. Klaxon kind of went out of development a couple of years ago. The Marshall Project kind of ran out of steam on that particular project. A lot of the people left Marshall Project, some floated in. It became kind of like a very large project of their own. But DocumentCloud has taken on that project, and now you can monitor websites pretty easily. Like, let's say I have a website I want to monitor for changes, and once it's changed, I get an email notification. I can type in the site and a particular CSS selector that just means like a portion of the website that I'm actually interested in monitoring. If I wanted to monitor the whole site, I could do like a star or something like that. And I can also check for changes on a schedule. So I can check for hourly, daily, weekly, so on and so forth. There's a plethora of add-ons. There's things like Scraper, which allows you to put in a site and it monitors the site for PDF uploads. You can put in the site, determine what project you want to upload documents to. If you want to get a notification on when a document includes a particular keyword, you can put in keywords related to it. There's a lot of, if you want to have like a Slack integration or get a Slack notification when a document is uploaded, you could do that here. Again, there's the availability to schedule. There's other, I mentioned Tabula and spreadsheet extraction from documents. There's add-ons that kind of implement that whole thing. Let's say I have documents that kind of want to translate real quickly or really roughly. There's, of course, Google Translate and the Google Translate API, but if you want to just be able to use like a front-end tool and you don't want to worry about programming per se, you can use DocumentCloud to now translate documents. You can supply character codes for the particular document. Let's say I want to translate it from English to Spanish, and I want to upload it to a particular document. We have something called AI credits now, which is like if you have a DocumentCloud premium account, you have access to a certain amount of AI credits, and you can use things like translating documents, but also run machine learning algorithms like GPT-3. There's a couple of GPT-3 add-ons that allow you to do things like try to summarize documents, or let's see, there's a couple others. Summarize legislative bills, try to classify documents based on a subject, brainstorm ideas, so on and so forth. Or you can just do a generic prompt. There's a whole plethora of different things basically that you can do with DocumentCloud and DocumentCloud add-ons. There's also a Sidekick, which is another machine learning algorithm that tries to categorize documents based on subject and what kind of document it is. Yeah, I encourage you to use DocumentCloud. It's helpful. It's a shameless plug because I also work for them and work on those things. But I do think that they're valuable, and the vast majority of the add-ons are free. So it's just like things that you can use without coding ability, without having to pay someone. You can even do things like regular expressions, extraction from documents, stuff like that. Other tools that I mentioned some of the facial rec, mentioned some of the web scrapers, scraper add-on, DocumentCloud, Textract. Let's do exif tool. Or maybe no, I'll do metadata to go because I don't have it currently installed on this machine, but I do on my laptop. Metadata to go again is just like a website that I can use to just view metadata embedded into particular photos and stuff like that. Let's say I have a photo. I don't know, someone posted something on 4chan or something like that. I pull the image and I try to see if there's any underlying metadata. 4chan now wipes metadata, but in the past they didn't. That's how people were able to like quickly identify who posted an image and stuff like that in the past. But let's say a photo is like on Flickr or something like that, a platform that actually preserves metadata. I'll run it through something like metadata to go to see if I can get any information about the underlying like location or who posted the image or what kind of phone they use or something like that. I've used that pretty extensively. I'll do a quick, very quick, brief intro into like data brokers. There's tons of like free ones. I'm not particularly certain which ones work in Canada and which ones don't. This one probably doesn't. But let's say like I'm interested in an individual in the US. There's like even free tools like this. This is a really fun one that I kind of like to do is the mayor of Chicago is Lori Lightfoot. So sometimes I like to see if she's moved. And so I'll go into like, So go into like Lori Lightfoot. No, she still lives on Wrightwood or whatever. There's been like protests at her house and stuff like that. It's like public information at this point. But it's sometimes I'll use up a data broker to try to figure out like more information. Once I use like a data broker, let's say I have an address or a phone number or something like that. What I like to do is like let's say I have a phone number. If I have a clean phone or something like that, I'll add them to my contacts and then I'll use the import your contacts sort of feature on like Facebook and Snapchat and all those sorts of things. And then I'll be able to figure out like where they are on social media and stuff. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but I do want to cover it. Open Oversight is a public searchable database of law enforcement officers. We're trying to build it out, developing your own product is hard, rolling out your own code is hard. But the beauty of this is it's open source and other folks have taken on the task of maintaining Open Oversight. And, there's other instances. So like, let's say you want to run your own database and you don't want to necessarily include your law enforcement info on the main Open Oversight instance. People have like forked the code and run their own version of Open Oversight. But it allows you to do things like browse officer galleries. So like, let's say there's a police department that I'm particularly interested in, let's say the Burlington Police Department. I can look at the officers and I'll go through and it'll be able to show images of the officers and things like that. And there's various techniques to try to get, you use the Freedom of Information Act request or public records request to get rosters is the first thing you want to get. And then like, you can do things like graduation photos to get images of officers to include in the database, or if you're on the street, just take a snapshot of their badge number and their name and their face and stuff like that, and you can include in. And that's fair game because they're in the public. Or you can do things like social media analysis. You can dig them up on Facebook, and we'll get like takedown requests from officers all the time. It's really hilarious when they try to email in. They're like, take my image off the internet. It was like, dude, you posted on Facebook, or like this was taken of you in public. Like you have no expectation of privacy. But yeah, Burlington has done a really great job of actually indexing all of their officers. So it's really easy to be able to detect, who an officer is. The idea behind Open Oversight was when people were trying to file misconduct reports. It was very difficult because police officers in Chicago in particular, they love to cover their badge number and their name. So if someone said it's like, if there was just like a way that like I could go through a gallery of images and say that was the guy, like a lineup of police officers, that would have been the thing that I would need. So that's why we built Open Oversight. It's a tool that like allows folks to do something like that. And you can use different modifiers, like the officer was white and they were male, and you're pretty sure they were just like an officer or something like that. You can try to segment and try to see like, oh, this is probably the guy, or the last 2 digits of his badge number, but you don't know the whole one. Maybe you could look through there and try to figure out who he is. But databases are a powerful tool, not just for like, Open Oversight is one example, but databases can be used to like, we saw from other projects the use of like the most popular or like the most infamous evictors and stuff like that. We'll be able to track like who those individuals in our community are that are causing harm.